Hello friends, this is the Owl, and yep, we're back to Shibuya, which means that we're back to this insanity. As mentioned before, this is where the manga gets more and more bug nuts crazy, and oh boy, you'll see what I mean. One thing to note, the structure, starting from maybe the start of volume 6, is kind of a mess. So we're not going to be dividing this up into volumes anymore, as this and the final arc sort of bleed together and don't fit neatly into any one single collection. We're just going to do our best and push through with this and likely 2 more videos covering the huge final arc. Anyways, we rejoin our party as they prepare to head over to the elementary school across Utagawa, in the hopes of reuniting with the other survivors, retrieving the cache of supplies, and most importantly, getting their mitts on a tank and an armored car in order to escape Shibuya. Hajime is able to convince them to follow Mibu on this desperate quest, and he also runs into a girl called Fuka Mizuki, who, as it so happens, because of course it is, this is the girl that gave Alisa the scrunchie mentioned way back when. Yeah, small world, but more likely just narrative convenience. She's Alisa's biggest fan and the one who basically persuaded her to follow her dream. One thing about this manga, it's pretty decent, especially with this sort of balls-to-the-wall crazy concept. As I've said before, a good enough writer can save even a nutty butties concept, but wow! There are way too many characters, and while certain deaths definitely hit hard, had there been maybe half, it could have been way stronger. Regardless, as the limbs sing outside, we get an ominous little bit of foreshadowing, telling us that their worst night was about to begin. And, well, they're not kidding, but they're also exaggerating. Seriously, the final arc, bloody hell, just wait. We get another cutaway, showing a bit of Mibu's history. Unsurprisingly, he's that guy. Excellent soldier, amazing combat skills, but imprisoned for some reason, which is implied to be that he's nuttier than a squirrel sundae. Back with the survivors, Fuka gets cross with Hajime for some reason, then she runs away, leaving Saidaiji and Karasuma. These names, I swear. Japanese names can be a touch on the nose, and we're certainly nowhere near My Hero Academia levels of holy crap, come on, oyaji gyagu or dad jokes. But while I can't see the kanji, at a guess, Saidaiji is a well-known very big temple, and his name also contains big, implying that he's just a huge bastard. And Karasuma, this one's kind of mean. She's, how would we put this, a woman of a certain age, with karasu meaning crow, and this can also be used as a derogatory word for an older, unmarried woman, kind of like we'd use spinster, only stronger. I don't know. Anyway, they remark that Fuka is a weird one, and that nobody knows much about her, which, spoiler, there really isn't too much of interest here. But because he's a good bloke, Hajime rushes off to find her. Yes, he's kind of a boring, almost Jump-esque protagonist, mostly because he's always really good-hearted, but kind of damp, and that's, yeah. But like a lot of apocalyptic stories, it's more about the setting and side characters, I guess, and at least he isn't stupid or annoying. We do get a little tidbit of interesting information. Saidaiji and Karasuma know more about what's happening than what they've let on, which is almost certainly related to the kooky old man we saw previously, and spoiler, unlike most of the cutaways which, I can't believe I actually wrote this down, red herrings, their little cutaways will actually be important. That said, as 3:30 rolls around, it's time to get this show on the road. And one thing to note, I haven't talked about it too much, but this is a manga that does have a fairly concrete timeline, and I really dig it. It's not 24 or The Pit by any means. Seriously, The Pit is so good. But this and the final arc actually feel cool, in an almost video gamey way, keeping us aware of the passage of time as it builds steadily towards the absolutely insane climax. We will get there. Anyway, we see the survivors lined up, looking like the roster for the most bland fighting game ever created, so dead or alive, come at me comment section. No, seriously, those games are, as you kids would say, with your pumped up kicks and portable CD players, rather mid. And we get a nifty little mission briefing and map to explain exactly what'll happen next. On this penultimate mission, they will move up the main streets from where they are, using cover to be as safe as possible from the fish and limbs, then head onto the actual main street and aim for the elementary school. The party will be divided up into a front guard and a rear guard, armed as best as they can be with the limited weapons and ammunition they have remaining to them. Their goal is to obtain the military supplies at the school, reunite with the other survivors, grab the armored vehicle and the tank, and using these, finally escape Shibuya once and for all before the fish mutate into something truly unbeatable. Of course, this is ignoring one big potential problem that, well, to the manga's credit, it does actually go to not too long after I started thinking about it, so, well, again, not bad writing. However, Mibu says that, while their sightlines will be good on the main street, this unfortunately also means that they will be exposed to any roaming fish, and if they do run into heavy resistance, they will need to take the route under the mountain, move over to a north or south street, and try to find an alternate route. He does, however, remark that, rather ominously, these north and south streets are a complete mystery. Ditto the area close to the school. There could be anything waiting for them there. And spoiler, just you wait. Holy crap, your time is nigh, Hairfish. Beyond this, he explains that the fish here all act very strangely. At night, they seem unconcerned with humans and instead just do random bullshit, like singing, playing, sometimes accidentally killing themselves, or sort of pseudo-gossiping in groups. However, the limbs are the real problem. They don't understand the what, the how, or the why. Only that, if limbs are around, there is a risk of that touch of death effect occurring, where people randomly explode into clouds of baby fish, even if the limbs haven't come in direct contact with them. All that seems to be required is a limb present in the nearby area for any length of time, and then there's a chance of it occurring. If you're starting to get an idea of what it might be, chances are that you're thinking in the right direction. After the briefing is done and everyone prepares to leave, Hajime and Mibu talk briefly, with Hajime trying to understand the weird soldier, asking Mibu why he seems to enjoy this all so much. Mibu says that he's just as scared as everyone else and really doesn't want to die, but Hajime isn't buying it. There is just something really wrong with this guy, and he gives him all the bad vibes. Squirrels in the attic, you know. They head out, and the duo explains some new information about the fish. If they're singing or talking, they probably won't bother them unless they make direct physical contact. However, while they do make good progress, taking a breather from the background details, I think it's a whiskey bar, definitely something you would find in Utagawa. And Hajime remarks that it cannot possibly be this easy. While the increasingly mutated fish are less aggressive than the old ones at least, in part due to the bizarre and apparently random behavior they exhibit, the always aggressive limbs will inevitably be somewhere on their route, and those things are not to be trifled with. However, on exiting, they realize that there must be a better term for circles of chatting goldfish, but I cannot think of any. The best I can do is, gossip gills. Yes, I know. Feel free to let me know your best one in the comments. But they've gotten unlucky, because For some reason, all of a sudden, there are so many fish doing random things on the street that there is no way to pass through them without alerting them. They will indeed need to risk one of the lesser-known routes, and Mibu chooses the southern. Worse yet, it has started to rain, which will make it a lot more difficult to mask their odor. Wait, hang on. Wouldn't the rain cover it even better? Whatever. Regardless, what seemed to be a good start is rapidly going banana-shaped. And believe me, things are about to get, so much worse. They begin trying to navigate around the massive quantity of fish in order to work their way south, finally dropping to a crawl to go under the swarms, and Hajime's nerve starts to break. This is all too much. To steady him, someone reaches out and grabs his hand. Fuka? Uh-oh, that is another legitimately good scare. It's a limb. Oh shit. But wait, how the absolute hell did that just appear? And then it happens. All of the gossiping fish sprout arms and legs, and in an instant, swarm into attack. Hajime realizes just how utterly screwed they are. Every single one of these hundreds, possibly thousands of fish is a limb. It is absolute bedlam. Fuka gets injured and many of the party just die on the spot. And while the duo open fire, the fish just heal. They are surrounded by seemingly unbeatable enemies in endless numbers. And that's when Hajime realizes that Mibu is grinning like a maniac, laughing as he pours automatic fire into the limbs and the parked cars, which then, because movies, explode instantly, their gas tanks igniting, and the sudden and massive swing in temperature seems to be all that is needed as the hordes of limbs collapse, stunned. We finally learn the truth about Mibu, and yet the guy is just legitimately insane. There's this whole thing about him seeing real life as a video game and him loving difficult video games, but in reality, he's just a combat junkie that wants excitement and adrenaline at all costs, throwing himself into seemingly unwinnable situations, kind of like the Joey Herrick of the story, and literally nobody's gonna get that reference. 90s shows were the best damn shows. But as the surviving limbs regain consciousness and rise into the air, they realize that what this crazy bastard has done is lead them all into a trap. We get a cutaway showing, yet again, more events in the past. Saidaiji and Karasuma went back to the weird old dude's place. As he left them, really creepy phone calls desperately telling them that he needs to tell them something urgently, but when they arrived, he was gone. All of his fish were dead on the floor outside their tank, and a single, solitary giant goldfish watched them balefully from the shadows. This is, so I like this manga, despite it having a case of the galloping crazies, but I do have some issues with the storytelling, and this is one of the biggest. We've been setting up a whole mystery as to why exactly all the goldfish have launched a Planet of the Apes-esque uprising, and we see bits of it here and there, but it's all incredibly disjointed and comes and goes without warning. It's hard for me, working through this again, to keep even half of it straight. So, to you aspiring writers, comic artists, and mangaka, don't do it like this. Either do the Higurashi thing where it's woven into the story artfully, or just do an extended prelude. Anyways, back in the fray. Their situation is becoming desperate. Absolutely surrounded, not by your standard massive killer goldfish, but by limbs. Nigh on invulnerable, constantly mutating buggers that also have a mysterious ability to instantly kill people. We also see that, Mibu again has this thing where he seems to be disassociating from real life. It's not terribly important. Clearly the guy is just crazy. Anyways, running low on ammo, and many having sustained serious injuries, the remaining few survivors duck into a basement cafe, desperately slamming the door behind them. They only just make it before, yep, two of them explode into fish. The curse of the limbs strikes again. Everyone is pissed at Mibu, but as always, he doesn't care. They do come to a conclusion about the limbs and are starting to piece it together. If you're going to pop, everyone who is going to die will die at approximately the same time. So, if they were going to die, they would have already. For now, they are safe. Although, yeah, the limbs are still really freaky because of their, well, human limbs coming out of their mouths. They begin discussing what the hell that could be. And while Hajime recalls the doctor saying that there may be all sorts of bonkers mutations coming down the pipeline, why the hell would they grow human arms and legs out of their mouths? Mibu, this is what I mean by this manga being way better than it has any right to be. Incredibly well written when compared to something like Corpse Party, he actually hits the nail right on the head. Why would the limbs freak them out this much? Yeah, they're odd, but the truly creepy and inexplicable thing isn't the arms and legs. It's that the goldfish fucking talk. Which, yeah, okay, that's a fair point. But you're still crazy. That said, he also makes another valid point. This discussion is pointless. It is not conducive to their survival. They need to focus on their next step, because they are stuck not even a third of their way to the school, surrounded by hundreds of nigh-on unkillable limbs. Many of them are badly hurt, massively traumatized, or both. What the hell do they do now? Mibu, in his normal off manner, says that they'll have to leave everyone that is injured or traumatized behind, which naturally dismays everyone present. That's pretty damn cold. But then, something quite interesting happens, and it's a character beat that's not often done, but it's also one that I genuinely love if it's done right. Hajime speaks up and agrees with Mibu. Yeah, he says that Mibu's honestly right. This is going to be nigh on impossible without people that they would have to defend or move slowly with. The injured and the traumatized will need to stay here, where it seems fairly safe. The door is thick, the cafe is concealed, and there does not appear to be any other entrances. Once they acquire the tank, they will come back for them. If they die, they would have died anyway. Now, I will talk about this extensively when we get further into Gantz. If you've read Gantz, you know the arc I'm talking about. But this is a feature of coming-of-age stories at times. A young, moist, and naive character is forced to toughen the hell up, whether it be Nick Seaford executing the mutineers. And yes, David Fainthook is coming up a lot. I think it's all the fish. But how is that not a TV series yet? The Hope Saga's the best pulp sci-fi ever written. Where was I? Oh right. Or Hiccup realizing that sometimes diplomacy is not an option. Or Naruto, no, sorry. I cannot say that with a straight face. Fucking talk no jutsu, man. But this trope is actually handled quite well here, as we see immediately that Hajime has indeed grown up a bit, as he and Mibu spar, with Mibu telling him that, nah, no way they're coming back for anyone. This is gonna be difficult enough, and Hajime saying, well, when you play a video game, do you play it on easy mode? Calling Mibu a coward, and yeah, that actually works, but maybe not quite as intended. Mibu smiles, rather approvingly, and says that Hajime might be a little bit evil deep down, hoping that he's able to see more of that side, agreeing to his plan. There is a bit of bickering back and forth, and okay, this is fun. They are dividing the survivors into the front and rear guard, and Mibu refers to a character that we will later learn is called Alex as Mr. Foreigner. And while I don't have the rules, I will bet you dollars to dog poo that this is a direct translation of gajin-san, a term that I cannot let escape untouched. So yeah, it's been a while, but it's tangent time. You have likely encountered the term gajin before in manga, anime, other Japanese media, or maybe just osmosis from popular culture. But you cannot really understand the term gaijin and the complicated relationship between Japan and the rest of the world without understanding a bunch of geopolitical and historical stuff, and also sakoku. Let me explain. In short, gaijin is a term derived from the more formal term gaikokujin, at least in its modern sense, which basically translates to person from another country, with a simple neutral connotation as a raw descriptor. Gaijin, on the other hand, means something along the lines of outsider, with an emphasis on not belonging. The two kanji literally mean outside and person. It's a fairly controversial term, and its history is really fascinating. Remember when I said in the modern sense? Well, believe it or not, gaijin actually seems to predate the term gaikokujin. To those that don't know, Japan's always had a pretty mixed view as a whole of non-Japanese people. In fact, many of the very earliest 13th century linguistic references to foreigners weren't just derogatory, they were outright aggressive, talking about arming yourself out of the presence of gaijin, with the implication being that the Japanese should always prepare for war on non-Japanese people, frequently referred to as barbarians, a long-standing linguistic phenomenon with the prefix ran, referring to bedlam, war, and rebellion, and also being frequently included in all terms as related to foreigners. However, Japan gradually began to trade with and enter basic diplomatic relations with other regions, particularly Europe and China, and this resulted in some cultural exchange and even new religious ideas, with Christian converts appearing in quite large numbers, at least in part due to the influx of Portuguese and Spanish missionaries. And this is where things get interesting, because this lasted until the Edo period, where the now notoriously authoritarian Tokugawa shogunate, terrified that they would be ousted by more modern, more liberal-thinking leaders, and also fearing that the rapid spread of Christianity in the country posed an existential danger to them, began to, well, see, without any exaggeration, what this shogunate wanted was to basically be worshipped as gods by an ignorant, devoted, and fully subservient populace, and they thus enacted a bunch of cuckoo bananas fascistic policies. For instance, rigid controls on religion and religious practices, including the mass execution of Christian missionaries and converts, while instituting a form of Buddhism as a state religion, enshrining the nobles as divine, banning traditional Shinto and Shinto ceremonies, preventing free travel between different areas of Japan, enforcing a rigid caste system, and more relevant, sealing the entire country off under a policy referred to as sakoku, or chained country. The only significant trade permitted was with the Dutch, who have always enjoyed a somewhat favored relationship with Japan. A bloody interesting story, but one for another time. And even this was extremely limited. No foreigners were allowed entry to Japan proper, and no Japanese people were allowed to leave. Gaijin here became used to refer to all foreigners in a very derogatory sense, due to another kanji for gai, meaning evil influence. Terry Pratchett's fascinating novel Interesting Times actually explores sakoku in a wonderfully parodic manner, and James Clavell's Asia Saga, which, holy crap am I recommending some bangers today, is also well worth reading, as it's set in and around this period too. I cannot stress this enough when it comes to Clavell, not for the faint of heart or weak of stomach. The man is at Wilbur Smith levels of historical brutality porn. We may talk more about sakoku when and if we eventually get around to doing Blade of the Immortal, as it does feature quite heavily there. Anyways, sakoku lasted for 250 years and would likely have lasted longer if it was not for Matthew Perry, no, not quite, and the events he would set in motion. Perry is an incredibly complex topic in and of himself, especially as it pertains to Perry's rather expansionist view of manifest destiny and his repeated use of gunboat diplomacy as he forcibly opened the country under threat of bombardment from his sizable armada of warships armed with what was then incredibly advanced weaponry and ordnance. If this is all sounding rather familiar, yeah, the entire Wano arc from One Piece is a gigantic reference to Sakoku, with the Straw Hats playing the role of Perry, only, well, a bit less of a bastard. So yeah, while the country was opened, and Perry's siege is now viewed as a fairly important part of Japanese history, likely even beneficial, it didn't do much to change the overall negative impressions when it came to foreigners being warlike barbarians. So yes, gaijin. Japan has a complicated relationship with foreigners. On one hand, there is a huge push for internationalization, with multiple programs designed to bring, let's say the right sort of foreigners over to teach English and spread Western culture. But on the other hand, the average Japanese citizen greets a foreigner with some mix of curiosity, apprehension, a kind of benevolent disdain, and a general fear that they're about to be aggressively foreigned at. As someone who lived and worked in rural Japan for the larger portion of his adult life, I can attest to how odd it can be living there. While I spoke decent Japanese after a while, did my best to fit into the culture, and was able to cultivate some level of friendship with those around me, as well as dating a fair bit, I also came to understand what I semi-jokingly refer to as talking dog syndrome, by which I mean that everyone finds a talking dog really interesting, would love to go out drinking with a talking dog, but wouldn't want it marrying into their family. Today, gaijin remains a polarizing word. In polite company, it's not something you would use. Instead, you would generally go for gaikokujin, the more official and politically correct term. But in private, oh boy, you will hear gaijin constantly, often in a very negative way, and you may even see signs out and about, especially in the cities, saying stuff like no gaijin or gaijin not permitted here. And nobody under the age of 18 is going to say gaikokujin unless their teachers force them. You're just going to be gaijin-san, or, if you're very lucky, gaijin-sensei. Is it offensive? Is it just a casual term in use? I guess it depends on who you ask. Anyways. We see them discussing who will go, who will stay, and the like, and Fuka says that she will go and be part of the defensive group. Hajime tries to get her to stay behind, but yeah, there is a past at play here. You can hear the capital P. She's devoted to Alisa due to her having issues in her own life. In short, she simply doesn't trust people, let alone that they will come back for her if she were to stay. And so, they set off with Hajime vowing to find Alisa, Miyochi, and the rest if they're alive, and then return for the wounded. Sure enough, somewhere else, we see a battered but still alive Alisa and Miyochi leading another group of survivors, vowing in turn to escape themselves. So now, we have three separate groups of known characters. The wounded in the cafe, including Saidaiji, Mibu and Hajime's crew headed towards the school, and Alisa's group somewhere near the school, presumably tacking back towards the party. All the pieces are in place yet again, and oh boy, is it time for things to go completely bloody wild. But first, they're going to get a bit fragmented. We get another little flashback. The old guy's words were seemingly talking to a specific goldfish, the one that I think we've been seeing in the background here and there. We will learn more later, but thus ends Volume 7. Volume 8 is where all the various story threads begin to pull together. the pathogen, the school, and I guess the main characters really start to move and flow. We kick the volume off with yet another sodding cutaway, seeing school kids encountering a strange goldfish that, creepily enough, appeared to be trying to imitate human speech. Ugh. And again, boy, if any of this weirdness had been some sort of prologue, rather than random bullshit scattered throughout, I think this manga would have been much better received. About the only really relevant things to note are that the weird girl with the kimono, remember, from the festival, showed up, and we see that Uncle somehow fits into the plot at a more crucial level than we'd seen previously, and that many of the school kids who had encountered the first odd fish and the kimono girl wound up becoming cops for some reason. Oh, one small breadcrumb of where one of the students present, referred to as Mo, began to act weirdly with a morbid fascination for goldfish and may in fact have become the kimono girl. Alrighty then, we cut back forward, I don't know, in time. Again, bollocks to this annoying storytelling. It's yet another cutaway from just before the party set out. Carl was briefing them and basically told them that the goldfish seemed to be reproducing and mutating faster and faster. And if this keeps going, there will be no way for them to win. Oh, and we do see something ominous. Two things, actually, in terms of these new mutations. A limb with multiple, limbs emerging from its body, and a huge limb. Not as monstrous as the two princess birthing titans, but pretty damn big. Remember this, it's going to become relevant very soon. Back with the main party, the situation is becoming increasingly dire. We piece together that they've wound up taking a northern road and have battled their way close to the school, but are now stuck. All the routes ahead are cut off by endless numbers of limbs, and they are starting to get surrounded. Mibu tells them that it's time for them to push through or die, but there is an implication that he has some kind of plan. We learn that one of the men with them, a vaguely histrionic character who insists on carrying a heavy metal briefcase, is named Gion, and that Fuka is weird. Mibu explains that he's pinpointed some of the conditions required for the limbs to do their mysterious insta-kill spawn fish attack. Maybe if they put what they know together, they can figure it out. In short, they will need to be at close range and need to remain there for some time in order for this effect to activate. But they need to know more, and he believes that the issue is that they have only ever fought the limbs in the dark, and have thus been unable to accurately perceive what this attack is. So, if they were to use bright flashlights and baited the fish into attacking them, yes, I'm aware what I just said, perhaps they could get some clue as to how to counter this ability. Mibu attempts to lead the charge, but it quickly devolves into a catastrophic melee, and Alex nearly bites it, but they finally do catch a glimpse of this attack. A sort of black smoke that, on closer inspection, is, oh, holy crap, what the hell? Thousands of microscopic goldfish that enter via orifices, feed on you, and explode you from the inside. Kind of like those bloody things from the bay. Yeah, okay, random bullshit go. They counter this by, alright, don't try this at home, putting plastic bags over their heads. People, that's not how breathing works. But the implication is that the limbs are female goldfish, and the black vapor is a mutation of their reproductive system. There's also this theory that while they can regenerate from nearly any wound, this regeneration occurs from their heart out, and thus, if the party were able to pierce their hearts, the limbs would instantly die. Mibu hawks a flashbang, and Fuka does manage to stab one in the heart. But yeah, girl go stab, fish go dead, so at least that works. We then see a bit of Fuka's backstory, and it's, woof. But still not especially interesting. I will explain more when we get to the third arc of Higurashi, which, spoiler, is one of my absolute favorite parts of that amazing manga. But Fuka was orphaned and taken in by her aunt and uncle, who, despite initially seeming loving, were overheard talking about how she was a burden and realized that they would never ever consider her to be their family. She was also ruthlessly bullied at school, becoming a loner and a misanthrope until she met Alisa, who she admired, and was overjoyed when, after giving her a scrunchie, Alisa actually followed through with her promise to wear it on stage. Back in the present, it turns out that they've won by hitting the limbs in their hearts. As theorized, this is an injury they can't regenerate from, with the plastic bags, yeah I know, protecting them from the microfiche. We also learn that the regeneration comes at a heavy price, and this seems to be true of most of the new fish. They regenerate fast and are thus very hard to kill, but due to this incredibly rapid metabolism, they also age really fast. A powerful mutation indeed, but one with a downside. However, Hajime reveals a theory of his own, and this one is kind of spooky. This incredibly rapid life cycle is likely sort of purposeful in and of itself, the goal being to mutate faster and faster, and the outcome eventually being some sort of weird goldfish singularity. But what are they trying to become? Well, as if to answer their question, something absolutely horrific explodes through the wall behind them in a mass of hair. Wait, hair? Oh, please no. It's time to meet the second biggest nightmare fuel monster in this manga. Let's take a look. The thing that punched through the wall rears up and reveals itself to be, that's actually legitimately horrifying. It's the head of an enormous limb, but this one is something else entirely. And it takes them a second to realize that this thing has a nearly human face, human teeth, and somehow, worst of all, a full head of human hair. Meet the Hairfish, and this thing is just holy crap, damn it, what? I will say that this was a bit of a wasted opportunity, as the first time we encountered a limb, it was really eerie and had a suspenseful build-up, while this nightmare was introduced sort of without ceremony. I guess that this was what was being foreshadowed by the whole, we don't know what's out there near the school, but I think it could have been a lot more punchy. Anyways, a huge arm sprouts from its mouth and begins swatting at them, and we see from the outside that this thing is indeed one of the hyper-mutated fish we saw earlier. It's absolutely covered in arms and legs, and oh right, this has to be a pun. They've entered the Tokyo Hands building, another huge mall that's probably analogous to Walmart in the USA, but haha, get it? Hands! This thing is completely off the chain power-wise, by the way, and Hands proceeds to chase them relentlessly as they are forced to flee, but quickly realize that this thing is just too big to escape. However, Mibu, his usual bonkers self, is able to put several bullets into it from above, stunning it, and joyfully prepares to take on this new mini-boss while they all head to the school. Only, holy crap, hopefully there aren't any more of these things. Spoiler, there are more of these things. But you also have the two titans to worry about, and I don't even know how you would find this thing's heart. However, as they face off, Mibu remarks that he's noticed something else odd. While the limbs emerging from these fish are off-putting, it's not the weirdest thing about them. See, they aren't rugged masculine arms or smooth feminine arms, or even wrinkled old people arms. All of them are the limbs of children, and this prompts what is, in my opinion, the single most freaky moment in the entire manga. Mibu taunts it, and the fish responds, and then begins screaming, begging Mibu quite coherently to tell it who it was. I have no idea why, but bloody hell. Yeah, forget what I said. This is actually scary. Back on the street, everyone is battling their way through these swarming limbs. And once again, the manga seems to have forgotten how breathing works. We get some more of Fuka's backstory showing us that, yeah, she's a misanthrope, but it's honestly about as interesting as paint, so let's just skip. Cliff notes, people suck. Her only light is Alisa. Alright. The party continues fleeing and fighting, and are actually breaking free from the swarm of limbs. But then Hajime, all of a sudden, begins succumbing to his wounds, spurting blood from his mouth and collapses. To everyone's surprise, Fuka lies over him and fends the fish off with her knife, but it's hopeless. Surrounded, running out of air, and badly wounded, the group prepares for death. Only, at the last second, a tsunami of automatic weapon fire comes out of nowhere and sweeps the limbs away. Mibu? Nope. Here comes the damn cavalry, heavily armed with machine guns from the supply cache and leading a group of similarly armed survivors. Alisa steps forward, to Fuka's absolute amazement. Yeah, it's a bit of narrative convenience, but it still rules. Again, this manga's kind of good. The scene shifts to, oh, it's the cafe. Nice to see you again, Saidaiji. And he's speaking with the other wounded about what might happen next. I don't know what the narrative necessity was of that little cutaway, maybe just establishing that they are still alive and then back at the action. We also see that the author doesn't understand how recoil works. Alisa and Fuka share a genuinely sweet moment. While I still think that Fuka is one of the many unnecessarily focused on nothing characters, I do like how we've brought Alisa's story back into focus through her, so I'll allow it. Say what you like about parasociality. There is a certain potential relationship between celebrities and fans that can be, if you look at it with a more charitable eye, somewhat wholesome. Just because a relationship is parasocial doesn't always mean it has to be toxic. Regardless, closing in on the climax of the arc, everyone says a hello, and Hajime gets a face full of Miyochi's, well, chi-chis. Wait, weren't you spraying blood a second ago? Again, it's all a very pleasant and light-hearted little reprieve, another thing that the mangaka does understand. If you're just all horror and dark and blood all the time, it starts to lose impact. However, much like before, the rain starts up and the fish starts singing and going insane. Alisa says that this isn't that unusual. The behavior of the fish is getting more and more odd, and they get a sense that something is coming. It's no time to be playing fiddle arse in the street. They need to get to the school, arm up, and begin the endgame. As they enter the school, pursued once again by oodles of limbs, Gion, remember, the chap with the metal case, finally bottles it and runs. And while they pursue him, hundreds of limbs begin pouring out of windows and moving towards them, including, several more of the huge, incredibly cursed Hairfish, giving me frigging Jinmen flashbacks here. But they're able to narrowly escape and head towards the tank as a blood-covered Mibu rejoins them. We see in a quick cutaway that he was able to kill the massive boss fish somehow. Alright, and with the tank leading the way, everyone else piles into the APC, and they prepare to leave. As they do, Hajime gets a strange sense of being watched. His eyes turn towards a classroom window, where we see that one strange fish again. The one we've been seeing here and there, and also appeared when the crazy old dude vanished. And yeah, people who have been paying attention might be putting two and two together, and if you are, you're probably on the right track. They begin making their way back towards the cafe, with Hajime manning the 50 cal on top of the tank, and Miyochi and Kao working the cannon. Mibu is their driver, and sure enough, they reach the cafe and the corresponding wounded quickly. Pouring automatic weapon fire in all directions, they strike out for their next destination, but realize that something's very wrong here. The fish are no longer meandering around. They are becoming organized, suddenly forming an absolutely colossal wall to block their exit. They prepare to fire the cannon, but another hairfish slows them down, and before Hajime can reach the 50 again, he's struck from behind by a dragon eye, ripping his side open. While he's able to dispatch it Sable style, he is now bleeding heavily, seemingly mortally wounded. But he pulls himself up against the turret and blasts the hairfish apart. A cannon shell explodes a hole in the wall of fish, and just like that, they are out. Utagawa-cho lies behind them, and what lies ahead, time will tell. Sometime later, they stop the tank at another department store to tend to Hajime in some more gorgeous color panels. But his injuries are beyond simple first aid. Extensive internal bleeding and massive blood loss, and believe it or not, this is where the manga gets a little weird. We see Hajime die, sinking into black water and being drawn towards a light that turns out to be all of those who have similarly carked it in the story. But before they can do more than welcome him, he suddenly wakes, finding that he is being operated on by Gion. It turns out that his metal case was in fact surgical supplies. He's actually some sort of mafia doctor, due to having a criminal record, selling his services for a high price to private customers that can't go to a real hospital for whatever reason, and with multiple blood transfusions, Hajime is saved. Now armed to the teeth, and with a large group of well-equipped, battle-hardened, and determined survivors, they begin making their way towards Yoyogi and the university hospital there, in the hopes of brewing a pathogen to wipe these monsters out for good. And trust me, if you thought this story was insane before, well, you're right. But the final arc is buck wild too. We do get a fun little epilogue to this arc. First, to the horror of the party, we see that the goldfish are actually beginning to try and leave Shibuya. And the titanfish just seem to come and go, yeah. But this does put an even bigger ticking clock on the whole affair. If these fish escape and start breeding outside of Shibuya, we are looking at a full-on Gyo-style apocalypse. Gion, in turn, returns to his house and is attacked by a limb, but very observant readers will spot the bracelets and, yep, it's Sable. Yes, Manga, we all thought he was really dead, but Sable forces Gion to operate, and presumably he was the mysterious surgeon that Sable mentioned way back when. Then, Gion and Sable head towards the hospital. All of these story threads are drawing together, and it's time for the final chapter to unfold. The last bit of the volume and the penultimate arc gives us a bit of foreshadowing, leading us into the final arc, and shows us a bit more of Mibu's backstory. His unit was sent into Shibuya to investigate, well, the source of the fish. A titanic hole in the ground, surrounded by the city on all sides. It consists of 7 hypothetical layers, unique biomes, and let's just say if you go up you explode into a weird turd monster. Yeah, no, I can't think of a funnier way to make the reference, but what is it with holes in the middle of cities at the moment? But yes, their goal, quite conveniently, is Harajuku and Yoyogi, lying right at the epicenter of the nightmare. What is waiting down there for them? Well, you will have to see next time. Anyways, before we finish for the day, I just want to say a great big owl thanks, as always, to our amazing patrons, without whom this video probably wouldn't exist. I'm not kidding. If you're looking for someone to thank for making these folks are your first stop. Cheshire Quill, Melissa Marston, BK, Taylor Smith, Ang, Alice Teacup, Mally Pepper, Sam Glasper, Brendan, Majestic, The Spilled Milk, Kamarian Lindsay, Taylor Smith, Tak2M, Sefith, Anna MC, Mew Haku, Huna Hexchen, Add Claire Andrew, Nate Corbin, Fluffy Burb, Camoleon, Endymion, Jake, The Empress, Simone, Squid, The Hedgehog Gamer, Rafferty, Hermit, Yorgborg, William, Oishipan, Erin Arnold, Sallyface, Kozen Doji 180, Mootle, Hamwise the Stout, Gunslinger Zero, Jalen R, Mike, Chilled Ice, Ranger Danger, Rose Montgomery, Inukie Koji, John Nepp, Kel Core, Opinion Custard, Robert Dote, Wargle, Hunting for R2D2, Lee, Eleanor, Crazy, Question Man 6, Callie Caris, JL, Lawrence Goebel, Piece of Yeast, Cheddar, Lightspeed, Jathis, Fogweaver, and Polite Crow. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, and all that good jazz. It really helps the videos out in the algorithm and otherwise. If you do want to support the channel, please consider patroning up. You will gain access to some pretty fun perks like exclusive emotes on the Discord, an exclusive channel, early access to videos, an exclusive video, and probably more in the future. Oh yeah, and my book. White Whistles and Aubade patrons can also commission videos and deep dives, and patrons as a whole have a lot of input on what manga I cover and how. If you want to support us in other ways, you could leave us a super thanks, and Mrs. Owl's art commissions are still open. So if you're looking for some art as a birthday present or something, or just an OC, all of her links are in the description. Cheers my friends, and thanks again. Until next time, this is the Owl, signing off.